Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Next here at Leicester Grammar School, we'll be asking if environmentalism is the new religion. Before that, make a note of this email address, audience@tbq@mentoring.tv, if you'd like to apply to be in the audience this series. Next Sunday, we're going to be in Salford, back in our usual time slot at 11:30. And then the last edition of this series will be from Birmingham on the 10th of March. Well, on Thursday, Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old Swedish environmental activist, was berating political and business leaders in Brussels. She said the EU needs to double its climate change reduction targets to stop dangerous levels of global warming. Her solo school strike last September has now grown into a global movement of school children. An estimated 15,000 British pupils held protests last Friday, backing Greta's campaign. And this Friday, their teachers joined in, demanding changes to the national curriculum to give priority to what they believe is a climate and ecological crisis. Of course, the end of the world is nigh has been a rallying cry of Jews and Christians and Muslims for millennia. The Bible says it will be triggered by man's selfishness, greed, disobedience, and loving pleasure more than God. Environmentalists accuse the consumer society of very similar sins. Is environmentalism the new religion? Cormac, good morning.
Good morning.
Your flight was diverted to Bristol because of that, and you've just made it in, so welcome, and it's good that you made it into the studio.
Thank you.
In what way do you think the environmentalism movement fervour is akin to any type of religion?
I think it offers a coherent value system, a belief system, things we should do and shouldn't do. But it's also a bit like religion in that it often gets a free pass in public debate. When environmentalists assert something, for example, Prince Charles asserted over 120 months ago that the Earth had 100 months left, otherwise we would face very severe environmental damage. That really isn't held up to huge scrutiny. And if you mentioned Greta, if school children take time off school to launch a protest, that really isn't getting much pushback either, when, in my opinion, it would make more sense if they really believe that, if they protested in their free time.
Jonathan?
We need to listen to those children. We absolutely need to. We have got... I know we've got some in the audience today, but we will look back, I hope, in 10 or 20 years' time and say they were the ones showing the leadership. They are the heroes of our generation. They are seeing what the generation before them has not seen and certainly has failed to act upon. And the idea of, this free pass for environmentalists, I spend all my time getting called to account for the claims that I make. Go and look at bloody Brexit, for example. The claims that were made
Strong
there
language, ladies and gentlemen.
that didn't get the scrutiny that they need. Let's give the scrutiny to Brexit and let's listen to the people who are telling the truth about environmentalism.
Well, I'm not so sure. I think there was very heavy scrutiny in the Brexit debate of both sides, and people could take whichever view they wanted, but must have known that there were grave reservations on both sides. And really, it wasn't a choice between good and bad, it was a choice between
But hang on, comments. There's data, there are repeatable experiments, the science is falsifiable. That is not a religion, that is science.
Well, if we look at the models used by the UN and its offshoots, they have consistently overestimated the degree of global warming we would be experiencing now. But the fact that these are supposedly scientific models that do not accurately predict what they're supposed to predict, that really isn't being held.
But what about the deforestation? What about the eco-catastrophes across the world? What about the mass extinction? What about the plastic in the oceans? We can see
What about growing crop yields? We're getting higher crop yields than we ever had, but because that doesn't fit into the conclusion, we don't hear about that so often.
Tom.
So I think, well, you talked about you kind of avoid the ecological crisis and kind of ignore the importance of it. We're seeing the urgency we need to take right now. Look at the coral reefs, look at the bleaching. There's some amazing stuff about this sixth extinction we're in at the moment. And we really need to try and tackle that. And that's why these strikes are so important as well. And doing them in school time, empowering young people to have a political voice and a platform where they can do something is so important in this crucial time for humanity.
I think it's really important here that we actually educate
John,
young people.
now we've got a little microphone. Have you got one on?
I've got one on.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we need to educate young people about the food, where it comes from, and how it's produced, and then they can make informed decisions on what food they eat.
So you're talking about veganism and that particular debate.
Well,
I'll step onto that in just a couple of
Okay.
moments, if I may, because do you think there's something sinister about the school children following this cause?
Not particularly, but I think there have been previous examples where political movements have used the young as their vanguard
Such
to push
as?
their ideas. Well, the Red Guards in China were a perfect example.
Shame on you. How could you possibly equate what these brilliant children have done with that kind of nonsense? Outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. These children,
and this is a perfect example
it's their
of
planet,
religious-
it's their home, that
This is
we are
horrible.
ruining it. It's their inheritance. Don't you dare deny their right to speak. These are the future voters. These are the people who will hopefully come up with innovation and try and save our planet. How dare you?
This is religious fervour right in front of us.
Religion is
And
a way
also
of saving the
shouting
planet.
down.
These children are saving. They're doing the best that they can. Education isn't just about the 3 R's. It isn't just about what you learn inside a classroom. The classroom is on this planet. It is our only home.
Okay,
These children, Amy is a superstar.
Amy. I'm led. And Lily as well. So, Amy, tell me why you believe so strongly in this cause.
Well, I believe if we keep ignoring the pressing problem of climate change, then it's going to have a dramatic effect on everyone, because it's everyone's problem. Environmentalism is not a religion. It is something which we all have in common. No matter what political party you're part of, this is our planet, and everyone lives on it, and it's everyone's life. And the government keep pushing it away, and if the older generations keep trying to say it's our problem and not theirs, we don't have enough time to solve it. So this is our way of saying, can you please hurry up, and can you please stop ignoring your children and thinking they'll sort it out in the future, because there will be no future if we don't sort it out now.
And like, I agree completely with Amy, because it's like it's a way for us all to unite, wherever you're from, and it's all everyone coming together to save our planet. And because they can't just keep brushing it off the help from all these professional scientists saying we have 12 years until it's irreversible, and they can't just brush it off onto our generation, because we need to act now.
These, so many people complain all the time that young people are not engaged, that they are not political, that they're not passionate about anything, that they're sitting on their backsides on the sofa looking at screens all day long. And then we get people who are politically motivated and they still get criticised. You accuse them of being in Mao's Red Guard.
No, I haven't.
I twisted that just a little bit because of my religious fervour.
If they wwere to sacrifice some of their time in front of those screens to have protests, you couldn't argue with that. But most of them, these were held in school time. And the central point I'm making is, it's not that environmentalism is wrong. If people want to eat vegan, there are lots of proven advantages of that. I wouldn't do it myself, but it's an arguable case. Where I lose track from environmentalism is when it is taken as a given and the outcome of every debate is preordained before it starts.
Well, we clearly do care, because I took time out of my life to do this, and we all took time out of our lives, and it is a given because it's our planet. And if we did it on the weekend, then this debate wouldn't be happening. We wouldn't have a voice because no one would listen to us.
These are the same patronising arguments that they put forward against the suffragettes, to oppress women, to say, you don't know what you're talking about, you're not educated, you should go back and do what you should be doing, and then come back when you've learned something. We should be standing very, very firm alongside these young people. But also in that striking at school, it's a very important point, because the whole education system is geared up towards the workplace system. It's to create economic units to compete in a global marketplace. It's to perpetuate the consumer society that we have to drastically change, and we have to turn around in 12 years. So making that bold statement, and now being backed up by teachers, incidentally, who say we need that broader curriculum to teach about climate change, by doing what they can where they are at school, they're making a very, very important statement about how much needs to change if we're going to tackle this climate emergency.
David, morning.
Good morning.
You do think, you work in the fashion industry, and you campaign on the waste in the fashion industry, which is extraordinary. and unsustainable. But you do make a point that we can't forget about, in this whole environmental debate, about Jesus, don't you?
It's a motivation for me that a Christian perspective on the environment is something that drives action. The principle within Christianity is that your beliefs affect your life and your activities.
But there are many environmentalists who are driven merely by a concern for their fellow human beings and their fellow creatures and animals on the planet, and their concern for the future of the planet. And Jesus is not in the equation. Are they then? They don't care any less than you?
No, I mean, their beliefs are influencing their actions. The problem we have in our society is that there is a knowledge or belief action gap. And whereas people can sign up to certain beliefs, and yes, we want to save the planet, it doesn't affect their lives. So they will buy from sweatshops. They will buy garments from sweatshops, for example, or they will buy things and discard them without thinking, how can we make the best use of these resources?
But more and more people are thinking, they're making the choices on such matters as palm oil and on things like that. So, but do you think there is a fervour? Do you think there is something of the sort of morally holier than thou about environmentalism?
Yes, environmentalism does have those marks of a religion, in the sense that it brings, you ought to be doing this. And wherever you find you ought to be doing it, there is a moral issue here. And where does the source of that authority come from, that you ought to be doing these things? And in many cases, it is just borrowed.
Science?
Well, science can't give you an ought. It can give you an ethic. It can say, we adopt this ethic because of our
It gives you a hurry up.
And if you don't what's going on, and you got to do something about it.
Yeah, but it doesn't tell you you ought to do it, because there's no right and wrong.
Look at the data.
What more do you need? You look at the data and you can go, actually, you know what? This is an issue right now. We need to act. These young children, these young people are completely correct.
Jay wants to come in.
We need to give a spiritual angle to this particular very serious issue that we face. We're walking into a nightmare situation. The spiritual element that I'm presenting is this. The world that we live in has been strongly driven by commercial forces, materialism, chase after material goals, and because it is chasing after material goals, more and more, eat more, drink more, consume more, throw out more, we are creating greater greenhouse effects. So it is, if you like the spiritual dimension, saying focus on a more spiritual aspiration rather than a purely humanist, materialistic aspiration, that will solve the issue that we face today. It's this idea of being fixated on matter and fulfilling of material desires that is driving this thing on. Not that governments can't be blamed, it's humanity.
Governments can be blamed. I think it's really right to say that they can't be, because at the end of the day, this goes further and bigger than just one individual. This is the way that companies run. This is the way that we run in society. At the end of the day, to argue that there's a difference between material this and material desires and spiritual desires, at the end of the day, regardless of desire...
Is there a thin line between righteous and self-righteous? Though, I mean, you know, some people say, look, there is a kind of quasi-religious aspect to this. There's kind of martyrs and there's converts, there's promises of a better tomorrow, there's fighting to preserve Eden, there's sinners, there's heretics, and you've got your Satan as well. Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
Do you acknowledge that, you know, in humankind's desire to believe in something, discuss, there is a kind of an element of that in environmentalism, at least?
I think there's an element in both religion and environmentalism, and I'm going to agree with my friend, surprisingly, about, you know, science does give us the evidence, but then we need to decide what we're going to do with that evidence.
Yeah.
And that's where philosophy comes in, that's where religion comes in, that's where political action comes in. But I don't think it's sufficient, in fact it isn't sufficient, just to say it comes down to personal responsibility, personal spirituality. We need political solutions right now, and this is what the young people are saying. They're saying the politicians have failed to act, they've failed to take the necessary action. They need to kick up the backside. They need a bit of religious fervour, frankly, if we're going to sort out this climate emergency.
So, John. Hi, well, welcome. We've got Ed here, who's a vegan, and you're a butcher. So, oh, look at that. Look at that. That's what we want more of. Are you both available to go to Brussels next week? Do you feel demonised as a butcher? Because, you know, you have high animal welfare standards, don't you?
I think this is about educating about production systems and that, and I think a lot of the production systems all get lumped together. And as a small retail butcher who has direct contact with the farms, I feel that I can offer my customers the traceability, the welfare, and also how those animals are looked after and fed.
Can you tell me how they're looked after and fed?
Yes, I can tell you how they're looked after and fed. We actually go and visit the farms. We actually have an abattoir as well.
And how are they killed in the abattoir?
So they're killed in the abattoir. This is not a debate on killing methods, or this is a debate on environmentalism.
But can you tell me how they are killed in the abattoir?
Well, they're electrocuted, so they're knocked out cold, and then they...
But it doesn't always work, so does it?
It does work.
It doesn't always work, though, does it?
We have vets there watching everything. We're even on CCTV now, all the time. So there's never been higher welfare standards in this country than there are at the moment, and we're wanting to defend those standards, especially with regard to Brexit and that as well.
Why are you doing that in the first place? You don't have to do it.
We do it because you know, we believe that we should eat a varied diet, and meat is part of that diet. Well, that's your opinion,
but it's a fact as well. It's a fact that we don't need to eat these products. So take the life of an animal unnecessary can never be high welfare.
We can choose to
eat
these products.
Okay, gentlemen.
We're going to produce.
It was all going so well, gentlemen. We hear you. But what is it doing to the environment?
So the issue of talking about the impact of...
Taking out the animal welfare aspect.
Absolutely. Talking about climate change and not addressing the role that animal agriculture plays is like talking about lung cancer and not addressing the role that cigarette smoking plays.
But British agriculture has reduced carbon emissions by 20% since 1990. 65% of the land, the arable land in this country, the agricultural land in this country, is grass. That locks in 90 billion tonnes of carbon into our soils, right? Animals are an essential part of that actual life cycle. They cannot emit more carbon than they eat. They are part, and that's why Natural England and people like the RSPB actually support grazing animals. We're talking about grass-fed livestock here. We're talking about small butchers who have those short supply chains,
Ed responded.
low travel distances, supporting the local food economy, which all has a big effect.
Animal welfare better here than many other parts of the world where it's horrific. But there are some horrific things online. You have to look about what's happening in our country in some circumstances.
And there's a documentary called Land of Hope and Glory online, which talks all about what happens to animals in the UK. But let me respond, please. Okay. So there's two studies. The first study was a 5-year study conducted by the University of Oxford. It's the most comprehensive study that's ever been conducted exploring the relationship between the environment. Was this the one that was run by a vegan? But he wasn't vegan when he started, but he was vegan when he finished it because of what he found out. And what he discovered...
You may be after this conversation, John, as well.
Not very likely.
What he discovered is that 85% of the farmland that we use is currently dedicated to animal agriculture. And if the world shifted to a plant-based diet, we could reduce the amount of land we needed for agriculture by 75%. He conducted, and at the end he summarised by saying that the best thing that we can do for our planet is to live a vegan lifestyle. Now the second study was the most comprehensive study ever conducted, exploring the relationship between food and the environment. And it said that in this country, in the UK, we had to reduce our beef, our lamb and our pig consumption by 90% and our dairy and poultry and egg consumption by 60% to not hit that 1.5 degree threshold rise in 12 years' time. The studies are out there, the information is out there, we have to listen.
Thank you both. John, I want to, Father David Rocks, isn't religion the problem? Because, or many of the Abrahamic faiths, because they have put us at the centre of everything. They've made it all anthropocentric, and it's all about us.
Well, going back to the earlier debate, it's the now that we have, affects the then, as I was saying, Pope Francis has said, that when we talk about forgiveness, God can forgive us, and imitating that, we can forgive each other, but that nature will come and perhaps slap us. So what has happened now, what we've got in the earth is an inheritance from previous generations that we can then pass on to future generations. And that's why it's important for us to think about what we ought to do. So the questions, the scientific questions, as we've talked about, are quite blatantly before us. And what we need to do is what we need to evolve is a moral compass of how we act prudently on those things.
Does birth control, of course, not come into it in your world at all, does it?
Birth control? In what sense is birth control relevant to that?
Population.
Population.
People.
Yeah. So
getting there? Too many people.
Too many people. Yeah, well, in that's in terms of a prudent way of procreating and prudent ways to respect each other as human beings.
Yeah.
So it's, in a sense, it goes back to your original challenge. It's not all about me, in a sense. It's not about, it's about how I relate to the environment and how I relate to other people. Responsible way of stewarding our environment, which includes responsible ways of expressing our love for each other sexually, and in terms of how we relate to one another. And obviously that's a very broad debate.
Yes, sir. What would you like to say?
Yeah, I think the environment is important. It's also really important how we tackle the environment problem. Studies from the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change have shown that over the last decade, emissions from farmers has reduced and can be reduced by another third. And I think there are other techniques which we should implement to improve the environment. For example, offering tax shields to big corporations investing in green energy. I think that slaying the hard-working man and woman that made this country great is wrong.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes. It's coming. The microphone. There it is, yeah.
I'd like to support what's just been said. I think there's a lot of judgment in this room, and it's about what's your lifestyle, what's this. I'm a Green, and I'm used to being judged because people usually say things like, but do you own a car? You're a hypocrite.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to shut down debate on green issues, which affect us all, and that's what the young people are saying. So we need to stop using our energy in this way and try and look at how we
So in a sense, because you're criticising for what you believe, in a sense it's the same as a Christian who does something which might be termed as anti-Christian and then the Christian would say, yeah, but we're all sinners.
Well, yes, it's a way of dismissing, or, I'm not going to say because I'm personally not vegan, but that doesn't mean to say I don't believe passionately about green issues and about animal welfare, but it's too easy to go down these kind of dead ends, and I think we just need to think, we know it's about 12, we've got 12 years to really make a difference here, so what are we going to do? What are we going to do politically? We need to get the politicians and leaders to actually lead.
They've got other things on their mind at the moment. That's the thing. And to think beyond the electoral cycle. What decision have you made, Anna?
So, everything I do in my life is trying to reduce my carbon footprint. So I am vegan and I don't have a car and I don't fly and I have a solar panel for my electricity. And I'm not really a consumer, so I buy my clothes in charity shops. But I've also made the personal decision to not have any children. So a wise man once said, it's all very well reducing our carbon footprints. Oh, sorry, it's not much use reducing our carbon footprints if we keep increasing the number of feet.
Yeah.
So yeah, overpopulation is a massive issue. And I don't know if you've heard of Earth Overshoot Day. So it is, you can Google it, it's very interesting. It's terrifying. So it is the day in the year annually where we use up all the renewable resources that the Earth can provide. And last year it was in August. That was it, gone. We are overstretching our resources and we have to do something about it. But it's very difficult to bring this point up because population, and you can't tell people to not have children. You can't, it's such an emotive issue, It's something that is very difficult to talk about without thinking
being
about
judgmental.
Well, absolutely. Well, not even just being judgmental, but we're kind of like, the implication is we have to suppress our human urges, our natural urges to procreate. Okay, and that's not a conversation that's easy to have, but we must have it. We must have it. We cannot continue to expand exponentially. But there is just not enough room. There are not enough resources. We
need young people.
Is that an argument to be having more?
Well, I know somebody's got to procreate.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my choice to not have children doesn't mean that everybody's going to stop.
That's your particular...
everyone watching this programme is suddenly not going to stop.
Well, you're being very persuasive.
Well, there you go. But generally, the trend is upwards at the moment, and we have to stop that because factually, we cannot survive on the planet if we continue to add more and more and more to our population. And this is talking about global population, of course. So there are nuances within different countries. Some countries, the birth rate is lower, and in some it is expanding. We do have to remember that here in the West, our carbon footprints are larger than countries in the third world where population is expanding faster. So yeah, even though our population growth here is slowing, but per capita we consume more. So actually, we are more damaging, or we are draining the Earth's resources far quicker. But it's a conversation that we cannot ignore.
Do you want to come back in, Cormac? I'm sure you have some thoughts.
Well, I think I agree with you that there is good news on the world population, that growth has tailed off in pretty much all the continents, apart maybe from Africa. and we made huge progress getting to the Millennium Development Goals in terms of reducing poverty, world poverty. And this may have been a reason why politicians weren't paying so much attention to this issue, that there were even more pressing issues than global warming, namely millions of people facing really brutal, horrible lives, and by
which global
addressing
warming could well
poverty,
make a whole lot worse.
It may make it worse, but they need help right now. The one issue I would draw a parallel with religion and environmentalism is the notion that we do good things to try and make the world better, even if others don't. So even if in the West we were to agree on the Paris Accord and on enforceability of the goals there, growing countries like China and India didn't.
Russia.
So the problem is it's a global system, so no matter how virtuous we might be in our corner of the world, unless we can persuade everybody else to be virtuous, we're going to face the same problem.
We can persuade by leading by example. So just because you're one person does not mean you shouldn't do it. And let's use the example of Greta Thunberg, sorry, Swedish pronunciation, the example that we used at the very beginning. So that was one girl who sat outside the Swedish Parliament every Friday with a sign that said "School Strike for Climate." That's all she did, and look what happened. Look what happened. Thousands of children. So yes, we can't just say, oh, well, those guys are not signing up to the Paris Accord, so we're not going to bother either. We have to lead by example.
But us feeling virtuous that we've done our bit won't really matter.
Is this an urgent,
if
pressing
others
problem?
don't.
Is climate change an urgent, pressing problem of concern to you for the planet?
It's a looming problem. I'm not wholly persuaded
Tom,
by
you
the
don't buy that
science.
looming problem,
It's
but do
affecting
you?
us now.
Tom?
It's a social issue as well. It's like we need to tackle it now, otherwise it's going to be too late. And you touched on briefly how it's like about poverty and people in developing countries. Those people are affected by climate change. So we need to do something for those people right now in our high consumption countries before they're the ones that suffer.
They have had the biggest advance in their material well-being in centuries in the last couple of decades as a result of intervention. And I think humans are capable of enormous innovation when put under pressure. And I think the pressure to address this problem is growing and growing.
And it's concentrating minds. Tim, what did you do, Tim? I'm sorry to cut you off, but we want to get Tim in here. Cheers, Cormac. Tim.
So I was involved in an employment dispute, and I went to the Employment Appeal Tribunal, and the judge held that a philosophical belief in man-made climate change was capable of protection from discrimination under the employment regulations. Now, I come to that from two strands, really. I mean, the moral and ethical values that I have that motivate me to do something about climate change, I think are shared by many of the world's religions. It's about respect for humanity, for the fellow occupants of the planet, and for future generations. But in contrast to a religious faith, my motivation is based on science. The evidence is there. For me, it's a really logical situation. We have a problem that we have caused. We know what the solutions are. We've got a really limited window with which we need to address it, and we need to work together.
We can see the science, we can see the sixth extinction, we can see the destruction of biodiversity, and so
let's all work together and urgently address the problems, and we know what the solutions are. It's renewable energy, it's cutting down our consumption of fossil fuels, it's about how we heat our homes, how we travel, what we eat. It's all these things.
But we're hypocrites.
We are hypocrites, but it's an addiction. We are addicted.
We are hypocrites.
Yes, the Western world has created this greed, selfish culture.
Human beings are greedy.
We're all human beings, and we're all obviously very, very greedy. But the whole point of all this climate change and the pollution and the damage that's going on is because of the neoliberalism, the capitalism, the greed culture, the throwaway culture.
I was in the Soviet Union.
Well,
that was terrible.
If you look at the work that's going on all over the world right now, it is the younger generation that's leading some of this innovation. But the big politicians in the Western world have a hypocrisy by blaming the third world. It's not on.
OK, so Lily and Amy, we're just running out of time now. What's your message to the politicians watching who didn't turn the television off after the Andrew Marr programme?
I think that we need to regulate corporate elites because they're prioritising short-term profits over the well-being of our lives and our world. And I think we need to just set up rules to regulate them, and it'll be like a big change and a big difference. And we're just telling the government to get on and do that.
Well, as always, the debates will continue online and on Twitter. Next week, we're in Salford at our usual time of 11:30. Join us then. For now, goodbye from Leicester. Have a great Sunday.